And Brad Pitt's unbelievable ass. And he's like, Achilles, it's time to fight. Achilles.
I love it.
What is this scene, bro?
Welcome back to Foreplay. We are in our Sword and Sandals arc here, and we are in our third week, which means we have now taken a vast leap forward. We started with Ben-Hur in 1959. We went forward 1 year to Spartacus in 1960. And now we have fast forwarded 44 years to 2004's Troy. Now, obviously, this film chronologically takes place basically like 1,000 years before our previous film, because in kind of the heroic Bronze Age of Greece, this is supposed to take in like 1200, 1300 BC. And this actually, guys, this film has a very special place in my heart. So when I was a kid, I was a huge fan of the Iliad. And so in the early 2000s, when this movie was going to come out, I was so excited for this that I bought a Troy movie poster.
How old were you at the time? What were you, like 13 or something? What were you?
No, 2004, I was... I was 18.
18, there you go, okay.
I was 18 in 2004. So this would have been my senior year of high school, I believe. So I bought a Troy poster, and I put it on the wall above my bed, because other kids, teenagers at the time, they may have had Matrix posters or Pulp Fiction or Fast and the Furious.
Animatrix was everywhere.
It's the way he's actually trying to make Matrix sound like it's like plebeian shit. It's like an all-time great film, by the way. And they're the losers for having that poster, but he's cool for being like, I prefer the old shit, you know. Like,
I do not think I was cool. I think I was the point of this story is that I was an ultra nerd who loved the Iliad, and while other people were paying attention to these other movies, I was paying attention to Troy, which I think is unusual. It was unusual for teenagers of the early 2000s.
Unbelievable cum gutter abs on your ceiling.
Yeah,
and you were just lying there. I love you. I love you, Achilles.
This is much better than Matrix.
You could beat Neo in a fight.
Wait, I've got to go play tower defense in Warcraft 3. I'm so cool.
No, it's more like I'm going to go play 1v1 and then watch some Spirit Moon replays.
Exactly,
oh, yeah.
Jeepers. Well, you're cool now, Monty. That's what counts.
Thank you.
Some would say so. He was in the middle. He had his peak, and then he arced on the opposite. He's coming down the other side now. We all let's be real, you know.
Yeah, of course.
So this movie I have a complicated relationship with, because there are certain parts of it as a fan of the Iliad that I really, really like, and I really love, and there are other parts of this movie that are just complete trash. It's like a very uneven experience to watch this, as you guys have probably
the way, even though I suggested this film, and it's one I've even suggested previously for other arcs, I didn't do it, Monty, pretending it's a 10 out of 10 film. It clearly is. Like, to me, it's an example of what you call like a flawed gem. It's got parts that are really good, parts that are bad, but you have to take it all. What I would say to you, to throw it back so you can keep going, is this. I do think that the people that have like a weird expectation about the film, like, bro, you couldn't film the Iliad as it is written. First of all, it wouldn't even work as a story. Remember, it doesn't even contain, if people don't know, the Iliad itself ends when fucking Hector dies and they do the funeral games and Priam comes to get his body back. That's the end of the book. Like, the rest of it, you all know the story of, but that's actually just like other myths and other mythology. So first of all, I think it's an unfilmable book. You already have to make some like strong decisions as to what you're going to do. And I actually think in this film, bearing in mind it's a Hollywood film, and we're not, unfortunately, like the rest of the arc back in the 60s and the 50s when they had all that space to like have massive 3-hour films. If you're in an era where you have to make like a reasonable film with action beats and stuff, I think they do a pretty good job of the compromises in this one, Monty. Like, I'm with you. It's sort of like a partial guilty pleasure for me, this film.
Yeah. I enjoy it because I can take what I like about this movie And I really enjoyed those parts. And then I could just
some scenes are biased. Yeah, some scenes
I can just kind of like hand wave away the rest.
Yes.
I'm like, this is dumb, but it's fine.
Let's get the joke. Let's just get out of the way at the beginning. Just before we build up the good parts, Monty's pointed out on past episodes, the absolute worst part of the film is where they take the Aeneas character and they're sort of like, no, wait, you need to go for the possible sequel. Go this way. And it's like that part is fucking ridiculous, Mike. I agree with you. Because it's ultra cringe. It's so cardboard how they do it. Like they don't even make it smooth, but the rest of it's pretty good. Sam.
So it comes at the end, guys, and what happens is Orlando Bloom, who has the sword of Troy that was given to him by Priam.
This is a farce.
In the corniest fucking exchange of all time. Everybody's escaping as the Greeks are sacking Troy, and all the Trojans are escaping out of this tunnel.
And everyone is being ripped and killed, and they're just sort of like, whoa, it's like, it's ridiculous. I know.
So as long as a Trojan has this sword, our people have a future. You're all dead. You're dead, dickhead.
The sword of Troy. As long as it remains in the hands of a Trojan, our people have a future. Protect them, Aeneas. Find them a new home.
I will.
Hurry.
Yeah, it's just so funny. So Orlando Bloom as Paris, they're fleeing through this tunnel out of Troy because, Hector says the Greeks won't follow them to Mount Ida inland for reasons. I guess they can't walk past a certain point and pursue all of the hated enemy to slay them all and make sure that there's no revenge. Anyway, that doesn't matter. What matters is, yes, he comes up and he's like, "Who are you, young teenage boy?" And he's like, I'm Aeneas. And he's like, my son, here, take the sword of Troy. And as Richard said, as long as a Trojan has the sword of Troy, there is hope for our people. Now run.
The city is dead. They're burning it to the ground.
Mom. What's your name?
Aeneas.
Do you know how to use a sword?
Yes.
And then obviously it's
flee! And everyone's
the story
just dying
is,
in the background. It's so ridiculous.
Right. And the story is obviously Virgil wrote, he was a Roman poet who wrote the Aeneid, which is about Aeneas getting out of Troy. And then eventually, he goes to Carthage and falls in love with the Queen of Carthage and blah, 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 blah. Eventually, he's the founder of Rome, is the story. But it is mega cringe. And the fact that they try and set that up instead of setting up the Odyssey is very weird.
Especially because, as you said, Homer didn't write the fucking Aeneid. Let's actually, if you don't get it, guys, that would be like taking Watchmen and just being putting a sequel hint in the end for some other book they wrote that DC with a different author did about the Watchmen characters. That's actually pretty fucked up to the original author too. Why it's crowbar that into my work?
Also, the Aeneid is essentially propaganda. So,
of course, yeah.
It
is literally.
It just is a way to tie antiquity to
the premise was, first of all, to tie Greek shit, but then also it was the idea that you were tying for real, the idea that the Caesars in some way did have a lineage to the gods themselves, which is obviously a key aspect of these stories, is demigods and people who've Achilles, etc. So but the thing is, the reason I bring that up at the beginning is that is the most lampoonable, easily stupid part in the film. Aside from that, a lot of the other things that aren't good are just things someone didn't do a great acting performance in the odd role where they're just not good actors. But actually, we were discussing this before we even came on. Let's just start with the cast, because I actually think the cast on this film, for anyone who hasn't seen this film, if you know Hollywood actors who are good actors, your mind will be blown by how many good actors are in this film and how well cast it actually is. I was even saying to them, even the bad actors like Orlando Bloom and Diane Kruger are actually perfectly cast as vapid airhead characters in the story, who are the least by the ones I have the least pathos and emotion for. I actually think they nailed that role as a.
I was just calling Orlando Bloom in my brain. I just gave him a Roman name of Scipius Leg Day because he's so twiglet-like, isn't he?
That's actually bizarrely though. That is hard to pull off. I feel actually, if someone had been a better actor, they would give it too much. You would feel too much for Paris. Whereas one of the best things about this film to me is, I don't know about you, Monty, the whole film, I'm just Eric Bana's character, fucking Hector. I'm seeing the whole Trojan thing from his POV, and I think that is a part they nail about this film, Monty. Because in the actual Iliad, they're not as hard on that point. They set it up almost as if it's Hector's the champion of the Trojans, and then they have Achilles on the side of the Greeks. And if you actually know, because of all the god shit, it's actually almost you feel sorry for one of them or you like some of them. But again, it's almost like they have that aspect in Greek theatre of you're detached a little bit, it's a story playing out, but you're not living it like you are in a film, funnily enough. So I actually think that's the part part that works. And so, by the way, if you are living that angle that I am, you want this character to be a fucking idiot because he has essentially ruined everything. It's his fault, all the shit that happens pretty much. And he is the idiot that when he's saying a line, like, yeah, you are supposed to think this is the equivalent of an idiot teenager at the mall, like fucking getting our country destroyed and invaded. Like, that is like, they actually sort of almost nail even that by the casting. It's almost like accidental casting. But I actually think the rest of the casting is unbelievable. Like, it's funny, you said this yourself, Monty. People are sadly only now going to know because of stuff like Succession. Mate, Brian Cox kills this role so hard.
It's insane how good he is.
It's bonkers. Like, he might be the best casting I've ever seen for that character.
Peter O'Toole also. Peter O'Toole is fucking mega.
Do.
Yeah,
Peter O'Toole actually has the best scene in the movie.
The last one you're on about,
yeah. When he goes to Achilles to get Hector's,
it's unbelievable, isn't it? Like, even though he's at the end of his career, mate, he should be like completely ragged. He's unbelievable in that scene, and he gets right to you.
Yeah.
How many sons and fathers and brothers and husbands? How many, brave Achilles?
It's the most emotional scene in the film because you know the problem you've got for a lot of the okay, so we'll definitely talk about the cast some more, but just for now, just off this point, one of the problems the movie has is tone. And tone is a consistent bugbear in this movie because the actors are delivering it in a theatrical style of dialogue delivery, which for the old thespians, Brian Cox, Peter O'Toole,
Brendan Gleeson.
Brendan Gleeson. I'd even sit with lesser extent Sean Bean, who I think is really good as Odysseus in this. They understand the kind of where you would do a British theatrical, and come here, Priam, and gaze, and doing this kind of stuff, right? Which is great. The problem you've then got is Eric Bana, who was still very green as an actor here. He's doing that delivery, but it doesn't have the same gravitas for me when you put him up against, these other actors.
And I tell you now, no son of Troy will ever submit to a foreign ruler.
Then every son of Troy shall die.
And it's fine, as you said, for Diane Kruger and Orlando Bloom not to be particularly good. They don't need to be. They're the young, horny teenagers that have essentially fucking brought two great empires to fucking ruin and got tens of thousands of people killed just because Orlando Bloom can't keep it in his pants. So that's fine. Brad Pitt's performance is really interesting, but it's out of sync with what the film is trying to do because there's no getting around it. Achilles is a fucking arsehole. He's a bellend of the highest order.
He is in the
film.
Iliad, to be fair, as well.
Yeah, but I mean, it makes way more sense in the Iliad, and also the whole storyline in the Iliad, as I remember it, was like he did have a genuine beef with Agamemnon because he had won that girl Briseis or whatever she's called in here, Briseis, I don't know, whatever, Briseis. So Agamemnon did take it away, but only because, to the king, the spoils you fight.
He was trying
right?
to like prima nocta shit out of Braveheart, basically, and fucking.
Yeah, and obviously it doesn't make sense in the movie because they're trying to set it up like it's a romantic interest thing tonally.
It's the worst part of the movie.
It was. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want
the love story that isn't in the book, obviously.
No. I don't want to turn this into me telling everybody all the differences between the Iliad and
Definitely not.
Greek
but we
mythology.
Could just say it is a terrible adaptation of the Iliad.
Yes. But the reason why this particular point is very important is because the romance of the Iliad is very explicitly between
men.
Achilles and Patroclus, okay? And the reason...
Thank God you can pronounce it properly, because these motherfuckers can't. Patroclus, Menelaus, it's Menelaus. What's happening here?
There are multiple ways to pronounce these things, but anyway...
I disagree. The ones the lecturers at my university said are the ones...
I say Menelaus as well.
Yeah, good. Excellent.
But the thing that you guys have to understand is the reason why Achilles wigs out and kills everybody is because he's actually very much in love with Patroclus and they have a romantic relationship. Okay. And he doesn't
Remember,
give
this is the key concept people always have to understand. This is why it's so worthless to read like intersectionalist fucking people writing articles about Greek and Roman love. They have, remember, in Greek, like 4 different words for the concept of love. There's like, it's not, everything isn't you just gay. It's not all just about bombing all of history, believe it or not, guys. Like, there's also, this is the idea of the ultimate fraternal love, you know?
And a lot of Greeks would not consider it weird to have both male and female lovers. And specifically within the Greek military system, there were things like the Spartans or the Sacred Band of Thebes. The Sacred Band of Thebes was literally like I think it was 150 male lovers, like couples.
History's hardest gays, we call them.
Exactly.
Just a tough, elite, crack unit of gays that are all having sex with each other, and so they're all willing to die for each other because they all love each other. So it's fucking great.
It was like 150 or something like that. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. Male couples who fought together, and they were the elite unit of Thebes. So this would be very common. It would be very understood. It wouldn't have to be under wraps or anything like that. But I think to make it palatable and a Hollywood movie, they had to turn this into a heterosexual romance.
Sure.
You know, or at least have that element. Now, the thing about Briseis, and I'll explain this. So Briseis is never really Achilles' love interest. He is a war bitch that he wins. Okay. And this would be very common. Obviously, when you win wars in the ancient world, you get slaves. That's just how the world worked everywhere for thousands of years. And the fact that he has Briseis is also part of a system of Greek glory and fame called Kleos. And when Agamemnon takes Briseis, it is not in the Iliad. It's not that, oh, I love Briseis and I must have her. It is taking away the glory that he has won, and that's what's offensive. And the reason why Agamemnon does it is because his war woman is taken away, because he has one, confusingly named Chryseis, and Chryseis, basically Apollo.
You can tell Homer was just phoning it in at this point. He's on some Tolkien shit, like Bilbo, Dilbo. Milbo,
so
Philbo.
there is basically a plague that is caused by Chryseis, by taking Chryseis, because she is, I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head. Sorry if I get it wrong. She is the actual priestess of Apollo, not Briseis. And there's a plague caused by Apollo because they take his priestesses. And so they have to return Chryseis to Troy. And so Agamemnon loses his glory. And now Agamemnon and Achilles really don't like each other already because of what happens actually prior to them going to Troy.
Imagine a king who fights his own battles. Wouldn't that be a sight?
So when Agamemnon's daughter, Iphigenia, is sacrificed, basically it makes Achilles really angry because Agamemnon lied to her to say she was getting married to Achilles, and then basically tricks her up to this altar where she thinks she's getting married, and then he kills her because he himself killed a deer that was sacred to Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. And then Artemis was like, fuck you, Agamemnon, no wind for your fleet to Troy. And then a priest told him he had to kill his own daughter to get the wind back. So he does. But but Achilles is there during all of this. He's
which is what they were channeling in fucking Game of Thrones when out of nowhere Stannis the Manus murks his lizard daughter for no good reason.
Yeah.
So,
so this is, and then later this is the reason why Agamemnon is killed by Clytemnestra when he returns from the war. Spoiler: Agamemnon is not killed at Troy like in this movie. And then, which also is a bummer because they could have set up a sequel, which would have been the Oresteia, obviously. You guys can look that up if you don't know what that is. But basically, that's the sequel where Agamemnon is killed, Orestes kills Clytemnestra, his mother, and then the Furies chase him around everywhere for 3 plays. But anyway, there are good reasons why Agamemnon and Achilles really don't like each other forever, effectively. And so that is one of the reasons I think why Agamemnon takes Briseis is to kind of humiliate Achilles.
Yeah.
But this would not have been, oh no, he took my woman that I'm in love with. It would have been more like, he is stealing my war prizes and my glory. And the reason why you go to war is for Kleos, is for glory and fame. And so for somebody to take that is like deeply offensive in ancient Greek society.
Also remember, even though they do like say this, they don't hit it hard enough for me. You have to remember, Agamemnon isn't the king and they're all his servants and soldiers. They're all kings. That's the whole point. It's like an alliance and he's like the ultimate king, who rules like all the states. But the idea is, if you're Achilles yourself, you're the king. You're a king of your area. Like the idea, again, yes, obviously you have to like show fealty, but at the same time, as the Magna Carta was entirely about, you, as someone else who's a lord, you get to share some power and have some rights too. You're not just a bitch to the ultimate king guy.
It's the one thing I think the movie does well at the start, and that is that when they have that thing with Thessaly, and Achilles has to kill giant Johnny Sins, played by Nathan Jones, the wrestler. That is all great because it puts all the story elements at play without having to do this like faithful adaptation of the Iliad, which all the gods are involved in it. There's like 4 or 6 books or whatever before they even get to fucking Troy. It would have been impossible to do a faithful adaptation. Duncan's absolutely on the money.
The Iliad starts in the 9th year of the Trojan War, and as Thorin said, ends with Hector's death. Okay.
Yes.
So like the fact that this movie, in terms of its scope, starts way before, and they have to assemble everybody and then go, and we get to see, Helen going, like leaving, is, I mean, the scope of this movie is actually way bigger than the scope of the Iliad
I'm more
itself.
forgiving, Monty, because it's like you're saying, it's more to me about, I just wanted to see them make, not just, I'm not a plebeian, I just want to see it on the screen. I just want to see a cool interpretation of some of these scenes that I've never seen. I've seen it all, because especially in this scenario, I've always told you this, Monty, you always recommend it to people. I think a normal person in the modern day who's 20 is going to find the Iliad so impossibly dry. That's worse than telling them to read like Shakespeare's sonnets if they don't know poetry, Monty. They'll put them off it forever.
They should read those.
So the real problem is they can't engage with a lot of that material. Like I think they would need what I had, like a really awesome classics teacher that has like a way of telling you the story or relating it in a way, like a cool way, and drawing you in and finding like the cool aspects of it, etc. So I think without that, you'd have a hard time like filming a book like this. So if anything, what they do instead is they just take the parts they want to show on screen. And by the way, that's even why it's better that's called Troy, Monty. Imagine this world. Imagine where the movie's like, coming soon, Homer's Iliad.
Yeah,
and then that first scene, again, by the way, I got scared when I saw that scene, Richard, where he runs up and does sort of like a bullet time, like round the side. I was like, oh, fuck, is the whole movie going to be like this? Please tell me it's not some Matrix out Iliad. Luckily, that is the only scene where they do that. Like, they do it to show he's godlike and has like extra ability and so on. And by the way, to tie it back in, that's why actually I find the Brad Pitt performance very interesting. Because personally, I think Brad Pitt is one of the most overrated actors in the history of Hollywood. Because what people do is they give him the burden of low expectations. Because they themselves liked that he was a beautiful youth. They do that thing where they go, well, of course, he could never be a real actor. So the second you do some real acting jobs, you go the opposite way and you're the greatest person ever and you're a genius. Like they did the same thing with Johnny Depp, by the way. And the problem with these guys have is, in the best roles, they can be really good. But they're not like a Russell Crowe who can just turn in like, a 7 out of 10 performance that's a banger. Actually, Brad Pitt's a bit more varied. So I think in this film, I actually think he is actually very well cast as well. I don't think actually he always does get to the core of it. But what I thought he actually portrayed, whether intentionally or not, is that aspect, which I do think fits the character of Achilles, Monty. It's the idea that if you were a demigod, you're not just an awesome human, you're someone with lineage to the gods, and as a result, some sort of weird like history where you sort of know your own fate and what time is and destiny. And in this analogy, as they're showing in that scene, you could, if you really wanted, win every battle. What that actually shows is like, because remember, the gods don't feature in this movie. We can get that in a second if you want. I think that's a very shrewd choice, by the way. I think you'd have a way harder time putting the gods laid over the top with all of their intrigue, and also how would you show it on screen and how would you not make it look goofy, I actually think it's better that that's not shown. So in a way, Achilles becomes a stand-in for the gods because he has this weird like barrier between him and normal life in the film. He has an aloofness that's actually that does make sense. If you were the guy who at will could choose to win all the battles and could essentially fight on your own, you would have a strange relationship with other people and war and what it means, and it's all based on your own whims and what's driving you at that moment. I actually thought that part he sort of nailed.
Go home, Prince. once. Drink some wine, make love to your wife. Tomorrow we'll have our war.
You speak of war as if it's a game. But how many wives wait at Troy's gates for husbands they'll never see again?
But it did feel like it had like a
there's
strange
really good.
difference.
There's really good nuance to Brad Pitt's interpretation, and as I said, I mean, the problem I have with the movie isn't necessarily Brad Pitt's performance; it's that the director, who we'll probably talk about, he's trying to frame Achilles like he's the hero of the film.
Yeah, that is an issue. Because, like I said, I actually prefer the Hector character. Yeah, I actually found that part was a little bit distraught. I think they couldn't figure out, like, was it? Because to me, essentially, one of the best things about this film is it's a tragedy. Like, actually, if you follow the Eric Bana Hector character, he's almost justified in almost everything he does. He actually acts out of like fucking virtue at all points in the film, and he just gets ultimately mega fucked by the whole plot.
Yep.
But it's supposed to be that great tragedy of like. It's like almost the comedy of errors, Monty. Like you couldn't quite know, things just looked up the wrong way at the beginning, and then this assumption was taken, and then some offense was taken. And it's like that thing that just gets out of control. So I actually find that part really compelling. It's why, in a way, you don't totally blame the Achilles character. I think they do a decent job with that.
Hector as a tragic figure in this is like they do a real good job of like cutting through a lot of the non-essential story components to ensure that you very much understand, you know, where he's coming from. But I'll add, you know, it's like little details that they take out, like Patroclus, he takes the armor without Achilles' consent in the film, but in the Iliad, Achilles does give it to him. Like he says, "Go on then, borrow my armor, but you know, don't fuck around, don't do anything crazy." And so that's there in the Iliad to explain Achilles' rage. It's one of the reasons why he massively overreacts and drags Hector's body around on the chariot, you know, because there is an aspect of guilt within it. But the whole story is about fate and destiny and how everything's on rails. And I think the movie does a really good job with Hector. I just think with Achilles, it's like, what are we trying to say with Achilles? He hates his king, okay, but is it because of like noble reasons that he realizes like Agamemnon is a fucking egomaniac?
No.
Well, not really, because Achilles is an egomaniac. Achilles, like immediately right out the gate, he rolls out of bed hungover, goes to fucking kill giant Johnny Sins, and fucking says to that kid, he just negs that kid right out the fucking gate.
He's the biggest man I've ever seen. I wouldn't want to fight him.
That's why no one will remember your name.
Isn't he?
The
That's why
one
no
everyone
one.
loves the meme of, yeah. But by the way, in a weird way, though, that meme has way more depth than the surface level. If anything, that meme is what that character struggles with the whole film, Richard, which is, in a way, I don't want to do this, but at the same time, I'll just be a nobody who just lived on a farm somewhere. So what do I do? Am I like, do I have to embrace my destiny and it'll be all fucked up aspects? Or do I imagine? Because that meme, even though it's been used a million times on the internet, it's actually a banger. Like in the film, it's straight fire.
But also, one of the things the film needed, I think, was an explanation as to why Achilles is this invincible warrior.
Right.
That isn't there. Because
that I will say, they don't even give you the origin story. They just hint
no origin story for him.
So
you don't even actually know in the film he's invincible. You don't even know that.
You don't know he's invincible, and you don't know his heel is his weak spot.
Hold up. I want to go back on this because I think it's actually one of the more interesting parts of the movie. So in the same way that they deleted the gods and the other supernatural elements, it's actually not clear that Achilles does have the powers in the story that he has in the story in the movie.
Yes.
He is presented, it's not implied that he is immortal. And I think at the end, when he gets shot in the heel, it's more that that's just where he got shot first, and then he gets shot full of other arrows. So for me, it's more of a nod to his immortality within the original Homeric story. But I don't get the feeling that he is immortal. I think he's just the best warrior in the world, the world of Troy.
There's one really nice touch. It's when they're sacking the temple of Apollo, and Achilles is fighting away. By the way, Achilles, the only warrior in all of Greece that can use a shield correctly. So he's having a fight, and he's dodging spears and arrows. And there's a scene where he just puts the shield on his back and an arrow just goes into the shield. And he's looking away and he couldn't have possibly known the arrow was coming in. And this arrow would have killed him. It would have gone in his spine or his kidney, but it goes into the shield. What I would have liked to see more of in the movie is to almost have this like mystical aspect around Achilles, like more scenes where he's narrowly dodging things and more scenes where inexplicably all of the fates align to keep him alive right up until the end of the film, because that's ultimately what he was. He was dipped in it was the river Styx, wasn't it?
Yep.
He was dipped in the river Styx by his mother and obviously held by his heel, which is why the only thing that wasn't covered by the mystical properties of the water was his heel. And so this is why no sword, no spear, no arrow can penetrate him. He literally is an invincible being, which is why all modern interpretation, look, as somebody that obviously did a little bit of classics at university and what have you, a lot of modern interpretations, you'll get some like lecturer who thinks they're being incredible. Was Achilles actually a coward? Like all of this shit, because he knew he couldn't get got.
Sure.
And by the way, a modern telling of a movie could have totally explored all of that shit, and it would have been rad, actually. But no, we didn't do that. So, I mean, look, it definitely needed an explanation. Like, you can't stop Achilles being this. I think it would have been better for it. I think it would have been better if
I think
you have like a Lord of the Rings pre-scene where you've got the voiceover.
If you're gonna delete, no. The thing is, if you're gonna delete the gods from this, you have to remember that his mother is actually a sea nymph. Okay, so she is a mythological being, and so if you're gonna then introduce the sea nymph character, right? All of a sudden it opens up all of the gods. I like the way that it's ambiguous in this film as to whether he has supernatural powers or not. I like that.
By the way, if people don't know as well, the reason why the gods part, I think for two reasons wouldn't work is one, as I just said, I think you'd have a very hard, it's the same as what concept they have. They've had the same problem, by the way, in all the superhero movies, which is the reason why they took so many decades to get to the like cosmic level of the Galactuses is how the fuck you show that on screen. Like you just accept the wacky cartoon because it's a 70s or 50s cartoon. Like it's hard to accept that on screen, like a big Galactus head, right? It's hard to make that look normal and not seem weird, right? So in the same way, I think you'd have a really hard time showing them. And then secondly, believe it or not, the way that it's actually told with the gods in the Iliad is essentially what they ripped off for Clash of the Titans. It's the idea that you have the story on the human level, but then you go to a macro level where we're almost just pawns on the chessboard. And actually, that's a part a lot of people don't know. They think it's the Greek gods. No, you idiot. They aren't Greek. They're the pantheon of gods. So, for example, as Monty alluded to, Apollo, for example, supports the fucking Trojans. That's one of the gods of the Trojans.
Are Greeks,
people like Athena are on the side of the fucking Greeks that are in this battle, etc. So it's actually also like in the book, a Game of Thrones battle of gods against each other. Like, for example, even though because of fate, the gods have to allow, for example, fucking like Troy to fall, at the same time, like Apollo like guides the fucking arrow into like the heel of Achilles itself. So the interesting thing is like it works in the books, it gives a different dimension. But like I say, I actually think it's way better in the film. Think how long this film is anyway. That you just cut all that, just make it only a human drama and just infer philosophical aspects towards the gods. Don't really make it like there's a literal god and there's a fate and you have to. I think if you do that, it's a bit too rigid for me.
If you guys want to see that, Doa and I have been doing our marathon of all the 1980s fantasy movies. So we've actually done Clash of the Titans on Nerd Legion, so you guys can go watch that and see what that's like if you're not familiar. But the thing about Clash of the Titans is mostly it's just, playing with the action figures, the clay action figures of people. Yeah. The thing about the Iliad is that it's much more hands-on in the real world. So for example, when Achilles is wigging out about Agamemnon taking Briseis in Agamemnon's tent, Athena comes down and literally holds him by the hair to prevent him from killing Agamemnon. Okay? And like you said, Thorin, when we're talking about Paris's arrow and Achilles' heel, Apollo is like there with Paris with the bow, like aiming it for him. So it would end up looking super cringe, is the point.
Yeah, you would
But
have
it's
like
also-
some dude
it's also
painted
why-
gold or force ghosted out in the background.
It's also why, though.
Paris, a little to the left.
It's also why Richard's right, though. That's why actually a big part that might be lost on the modern viewer is why it's such a big deal. For example, that like you go and take Apollo's temple or you disrespect the gods in some way. Because then the idea is the gods that just act through their human champions in the story and fuck you up. They will get revenge on you in some way. They will curse you or some shit like that. You know.
Perhaps it is not wise to offend him.
Yeah, which comes into play, which is why they let the Trojan horse in. Which, by the way, another aspect
absolutely,
of this movie. Another aspect of this movie is I don't think they don't big up the Trojan horse thing at all. It's
No,
like,
they didn't. Yeah.
right, and like surely you have to have at least one scene before the horse going, maybe we don't have to knock down the walls, Agamemnon. Because it just cuts to Agamemnon, Brian Cox going, you hear me, Zeus? I will knock down the walls!
Hear me, Zeus. I will smash their walls to the ground.
It's like he's just fucking, loving it, chewing the scenery, and then it just smash cuts to a wooden horse being delivered.
No, Sean Bean as Odysseus says something like, maybe we don't have to do that. And then it's like, time.
But like, that's bad though, because it's sort of like, hey, I got an idea, and then it's like, cut to the next scene, like, come on,
like a fucking Batman swirl. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it needed to be. We could build. They are a superstitious people, the Trojans, and we could, come on, do something like that. And it's that's the problem. I think overall with the film, apart from tone, the other thing is, there's just like one or two little bits of connective tissue that it's missing to tell a really like satisfying holistic story, and a lot of people's character arcs aren't very satisfying in this. Like Brad Pitt, Achilles, I suppose he gets an arc. It's a good arc, makes sense. Hector, best arc in the movie.
Oh yeah, Hector's is definitely the most satisfying part of the film.
Yeah, absolutely. Menelaus, I suppose.
Pretty good one. There's another
part,
not just the actors, but the way that like Brian Cox and fucking Brendan Gleeson play off each other is fabulous. They do an awesome job of that dynamic, and like by the way, they also. I also
believe they're brothers.
But have I ever complained, brother? Have I ever asked you for anything?
Never. You're a man of honor. Everyone in Greece knows this.
I think the contrast is also genius. That one of the things they do in this film that is so excellent is when you contrast the idea that like Paris is like a prince of Troy, he is like some fucked up twink from the mall. Brendan Gleeson and Brian Cox are fucking like hardened warriors who would eat this motherfucker for breakfast. Like that duel they have is ridiculous. Like, but in a good way, it shows how absurd the idea that you would even have a chance if you were that guy. It's why, again, you feel so much for the Hector character. Of course, in that scenario, remember, by all the rules of combat, you're supposed to let him just die. But how could you? He has no chance. It's stupid he was even allowed to get into that fight in the first place. So, of course, you have to insert yourself and save him in that scenario.
And remember, Hector tried to turn the boats around. He was like, as soon as he realized fucking Helen was on the boat, he was like, we got to fucking stop this. We got to nip this one in the bud. Well, you're going to doom Troy.
Yeah, but that's also the thing. Then all the Zoomers are like, yeah, but I love her. I love her, mate.
Yeah, but
that's that great line. He says, you know nothing of... So, have you ever fought a man? No. Have you ever seen a man die? No. And you fucked all of these like fishwives all over Troy, and now you've decided to take a king's wife. So let's be clear, you know nothing of love and you know nothing of death, and yet you will speak of both. And then he goes, but I do love her though.
You say you want to die for love, but you know nothing about dying, and you know nothing about love. All the same, I go with her.
Yeah. I mean, but that's part of the stuff that, unfortunately, I would say the Paris and Helen stuff is pretty weak. But it has to be because when you take away the gods, the real explanation for why Helen is even in Troy, because it's actually Aphrodite. I'm not going to go into why. You guys can look it up. It's basically a competition between goddesses that Paris is judging, and so Aphrodite basically forces Helen to fall in love with Paris and go to Troy. By the way, Menelaus,
she's jealous, right? Isn't Aphrodite jealous of Helen or something? Isn't that
no? What happens is they were having a beauty contest. See, now you're going to make me do it. Now you're going to make me do it.
Do it. Teach these Zoomers.
So I believe, again, I'm doing this off the top of my head.
The short version is there's a goddess of chaos and she wants to fuck with the other girls she doesn't like because they're all mean girls to her. So she puts an apple in, that's a golden apple in there, and it says on it basically sort of like, who's the prettiest person in the world? Yeah. And the others all go, well, it's me, of course. It's me, of course. Then they go, well,
Hera, Aphrodite, and
it's
Athena.
Episode of Gods, How I Met Your Mother. They go, well, we better settle this with an independent judge. Let's get a man in. So they get Paris, who's this big fucking Casanova, and they go, right, Paris, who's the best looking woman? But the joke of it is he doesn't even get to answer, because then they go, now this is like American politics, because let's each give you a lobby and give you gifts in exchange and make you biased. And so what they all sort of do is go, well, I'm the goddess of ice cream, so do you want unlimited ice cream? And then the other one goes,
what happens?
I can get, it's a joke, Monty, and then I can get you access to Disneyland anytime you want. And then the last one goes, well, I can get you any bitch you want. And then he goes, the hottest bitch, please. And then he just for bias reasons picks her, Aphrodite, and then she gives him Helen. And by the way, that's also why that part had to be weak, Monty, because you also have to make magic be in the world to make that make sense. Here's the other reason why you'd have to be with her. One, Paris is clearly a man who is weak when it comes to romance and love and sex, etc. That's clearly his weakness. That's his Achilles heel. And you're telling me the most beautiful woman who can ever exist is the one, unsurprisingly, that's not an alien concept. The idea you could fall under her spell and think everything's worth it. That works, but the problem again is you're going to have a hard time translating that into just a real world of like, she's just a hot looking woman. Yeah, that's where it is silly. Like in the movie, of course you agree with Hector. It's like, there's no point having a massive war over this. Just turn it around and say you were sorry. Like that would be logical. So that, I will say that's the part where you're going to have compromises if you take up the gods part. Certain parts aren't going to work in the same way in the film. Yeah,
that's fair.
Yeah. Also, Menelaus doesn't die. He doesn't fight
No.
Paris.
Actually, by the way, though, that part's better, though. Here's the difference. I'm with you on the Agamemnon one. That does actually ruin it a bit. I actually think the Menelaus death is actually well done in this film. I think it actually adds to the film. The story. I think, if you don't know the story, I think it makes the story on the screen better.
Here's the problem with it as well, because just so people know, having watched this film, you're like, oh, well, Helen and Paris, they're almost like, star-crossed lovers, and, Menelaus was mistreating her, and he was really piggish, wasn't he, at that party where he's like, my wife's over there, and look at me, I'm the king of Sparta. Fuck anyone I want me, like. And obviously then Paris just sneaks up and pipes her, right? So anyway, I get all that's all well done, because even though that's not true with the source material or whatever, nor would it even make sense within the times that she would necessarily be offended by that, whatever. But what you have to understand is how the story ends is Helen goes back to Menelaus. This is textually
She was mind controlled by Aphrodite. She never even wanted to leave.
And then on top of this, it's Euripides. Euripides wrote a extended poem called Helen. So when Helen dies, she doesn't even go to find Paris in the afterlife, like he says in this film. Yep. She seeks out Menelaus. She doesn't
because she loved Menelaus, and then Aphrodite mind controlled her.
Time. Yeah. So it's like, if you know that and you're watching this film, you're like, fucking hell.
It's what I think. If you just kill the gods, the problem is, I also think then humans would have a hard time relating to the human characters, because then you have to realize suddenly you're not human anymore with your own free will. Essentially, if you don't understand, guys, the Greeks didn't believe in free will. They thought there was just fate, like you say, in predetermined aspects. And the idea essentially is, how much do you bristle against it? And it's almost like a fucking wacky racist cartoon. Like, if you try and avoid it, it will just sneak up. Like, if you try to be like fucking Tom and Jerry and get on an aeroplane and fly to Brazil, it'll be there waiting for you at the fucking airport is the point. You can't escape your fate, essentially. So essentially it's more like, do you carry it with grace? Do you live up to the ideals? Do you embrace it? Do you understand this is what to live in reality is? But I think that would be very hard to show on screen in a Hollywood blockbuster again. I think the film's better for stripping that shit out.
I mean, but
by the way, as we mentioned earlier, the sleeper banger performance is Peter O'Toole. Peter O'Toole is unbelievable at showing like the idea of like the aged king who wants to pass on his kingdom, but he knows he can't fully trust all the next generation. By the way, even that scene before Hector goes out to fight Achilles, where he says that you were like the greatest son and father ever had, or whatever.
No father ever had a better son.
That's unbelievable. That's like, we were saying on some of the Insight yesterday, there are any scenes that will make you cry. Mate, that gets to our fucking heartstrings, those scenes. Like, the scene when Hector has to say to all his family, it's fucking unbelievable. Actually, the role also, I tell you what, this is what shows how wooden people like Diane Kruger are. I don't even know the name of the actress who plays the wife of Hector, but she actually does a pretty good job, mate. She gets to some of the pathos of that character.
She's great.
I felt really sorry for her. I thought they did an excellent job with that.
They also, I mean, a lot of the lines in this movie are not taken from the Iliad, to be clear, but I mean, it is very well written. Sometimes there are some misses that, I think are pretty bad. But for the most part, like when Achilles says to Briseis, "You gave me peace in a lifetime of war."
You gave me peace in a lifetime of war.
That is a giga cringe line.
Like a tagline to a movie poster. That would be like, coming soon, Briseis starring fucking, you insert the character. I don't know. The joke is at this point probably Zendaya. Zendaya is Briseis. She gave him peace in a lifetime of war. Like, you know what I mean?
But
could even be the poster, Monty. That could be the poster.
But one of the great lines in this film, in my mind, is,
of course,
this obviously the scene that we've been talking about, which is when Priam sneaks into Achilles' tent, which is a scene very famous in Greek mythology and stories. And the line that he says, where I believe the line is, "I loved my son from the moment his eyes opened until the moment you closed them," is like,
banger.
That's mega, yeah.
I love my boy from the moment he opened his eyes till the moment you closed them.
I also think, by the way, this is another reason I'm amazed so many people are so mad about this movie. Holy fuck, do they nail the ending of the Iliad, Monty? That fucking speech that they have Sean Bean say is unbelievable. That is one of the best scenes I've ever seen in a film. I think that nails it. So if you don't know, by the way, I'll be real behind the scenes. That's the sort of vibe I'm going for when I make those like think pieces that we do on Last Free Nation, where it's like a 2-minute video about like the greatness of a player. I'm trying to nail that sort of a vibe, because I think that is like the most perfect example I've ever seen of nailing like why people want glory and legacy and all this sort of thing, like why it means more than just like you died and you had a famous name. I think they nail that part so hard, mate. For me, that ties the film together.
Yeah. I mean, as I said, Sean Bean doesn't have a lot.
He is mega though, isn't he? He's mega in this film.
He's just perfect.
It's why the real crime of this film is that there wasn't then a sequel that was The Odyssey with fucking Sean Bean. That is it's right there. It's so obvious you should do that film.
I agree with you, Thorin, but you can't have the Odyssey without the gods. That's the problem. It's like, you can do this one without the gods, but you can't do the Odyssey without all the weird supernatural shit. Like, that's just all the Odyssey
We'll see if Christopher Nolan agrees with you. Since he actually did do the joke I just said of casting Tom Holland and Zendaya in the Odyssey, so we'll see how that works.
But I also love the way that. So, by the way, I forgot to mention, we mentioned on other shows, but we did watch the director's cut, which is the over 3-hour one. And some of the things they added to this really fleshed out Odysseus's character. So they added the scene where he's introduced and he's pretending to not be him and insulting Odysseus, which is a great scene. And Odysseus is known as a trickster character, so it's like very in character for him, because you don't get enough Odysseus a lot of the time in this film, I think. But he is awesome.
That old bastard drinks my wine and never pays.
More to respect your king, friend.
Respect him? I'd like to punch him in the face.
Yeah, I mean, as Duncan rightly identifies, gets like the killer speech at the end, which is what he says. What is it like?
The line is this: "If they ever tell my story, let them say that I walked with giants. Men rise and fall like the winter wheat, but these names will never die. Let them say I lived in the time of Hector, tamer of horses. Let them say I lived in the time of Achilles.
Let them say I walked with giants. Men rise and fall like the winter wheat, but these names will never die."
Great fucking line.
Just mega. And obviously Sean Bean, he's such a slept-on actor in general, I think. I would have loved to have seen more of him in this movie, although I do understand, obviously, Odysseus, you're teeing him up for the Odyssey. He's not a fringe character, but he's not as important as some of the other players in this story. But I think overall, like, one of the things that's good is definitely the dialogue. I don't hate the dialogue. There's a couple of clunkers, the lines that we've talked about. There's stuff that doesn't even make sense. But I think that there are a number of banger lines in this fucking film, which is fair enough, like memorable stuff. Memorable in the way that Gladiator is memorable, with strength and honor, and what we do in life echoes in eternity, and stuff like that. You know, that scene where the old motherfucker from Braveheart has his fucking fight at the end, and he's like going, "The ferryman is waiting for us. We will make him wait a little longer." And he's like, "Yes, let's fucking have it," you know?
The boatman waits for us! I say, we make him wait a little longer!
The battle scenes in this are really good too. Really gory, way gorier than I remember. Like arrows in faces, spears through heads. There's right at the end of the movie when Achilles is about to get fucking murked in his heel. He by Orlando Bloom, upsettingly. There's just a random decapitation, just a full decapitation shot. Just killing
So,
him, like, it's almost like
part,
a meme. It just
part of the
chops
director's
head
cut was re-adding a bunch of the combat sequences, like the not the duels, but like the big spectacle combat pieces, which I think are incredible in this, because
really
by
good.
this time
they didn't use CGI either. It's all extras,
they did
right?
a little bit, but not a lot.
Yeah, there's some composite shots, but like, you know, like matte painted backgrounds maybe or something, but like, also, you know, green screen, whatever it would be in 2004. But a lot of the battles, it's all extras. It's
That's
not
one
like
of the
Lord
best
of the Rings.
parts, bro. That is actually one of the best parts. It's one of the last films I've seen that you don't watch a giant battle scene and your brain go, you're watching a cutscene from an Ubisoft video game. Like you go, it still looks like I can have the suspension of disbelief when I see these fights. It's plausible. Yeah.
Well, that's why I like how the director's cut re-put in a bunch of these shots and extended them, because it's really cool. And on top of, like, it does two things well. One of them is that we get, just like in Ben-Hur and Spartacus and the other epics of the 50s and 60s, we get the big fight sequences that are really extraordinary. But the other aspect of this to me that I deeply love about this movie is that the duel fight choreography is maybe my favorite ever. The fight between Hector and Achilles is so
it's really
beautiful.
well done. Yeah.
By the way, one thing I love that they do in this film, I don't know how conscious it was, is when you have a tragic character that has to die and lose, you have to give them wins before they lose. And they do a really good job at doing that. Both like philosophical wins where he's just right about the things he's doing. And even in the battles, they give it where, like, bearing in mind, we know, again, it's inferred in this film, Monty, that he's fighting someone who's invincible. And unless you know, like an actual Zelda boss, you have to hit him in his fucking heel. You can't win. But in some ways, that's the genius of the Hector character, because he still fights what's right even when he cannot win. Well, that is the ultimate courage, right?
I mean, and what I love about the way they choreograph Achilles is that he seems almost like he's reading the other person's mind. Like his shield is in the right place, like a second before the blow comes. And the way he moves is unlike any other character fighting you will ever see in movies. They did such a great job of making his style unique, and all of the characters having unique styles. Think about the difference between Menelaus fighting versus Ajax fighting, which they have in this, versus Hector versus Achilles.
Ajax, by the way. I loved him turning
massive,
up.
They put in this film, and he's
he
fucking
smashed everyone.
and
he's like screaming like, "Witness me!" Like, smashing heads in on
I am Ajax, breaker of stones. Look upon me and despair.
By the way, they added Ajax scenes in the director's cut. The duel was always there, but you remember on the beach, in the first part of the movie where there's a bunch of Ajax combat. That's a bunch of stuff they added back in the director's cut.
What's interesting is that actor. That actor is the actor that played Sabretooth.
Yes,
in the first X-Men movie.
Yeah, you're right.
Yes,
you're right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
So,
I mean, it is funny that they have Hector kill him because Ajax famously commits suicide, not in the Iliad, after the Iliad ends.
His genitals cut off. Just a little detail for you there.
So
look it up.
Basically what happens, if you guys were curious about Big Ajax, what happens to him is that when Achilles dies later, they have basically only one person can get his armor, and that's a big honor. And Odysseus gets his armor instead of Ajax, and Ajax commits suicide as a result of that. So maybe a less exciting ending.
They make it clear in the fucking movie. This is the little touches that I enjoyed about this film. They made it clear in the movie that Ajax was a super fan of Achilles. He comes up to him after the battle on the beach and he says it's an honor, like, fighting by your side. and like Brad Pitt's just walking past him like, yeah, mate, yeah. Like, just fucking blows him off like you know, he's an
Well, I did like the sequence at the beginning too, where they're on the boats because the Myrmidons and Achilles get there first, and they just like rush onto the beach, and Ajax like, row faster. He's hogging all the glory.
Yeah, exactly. Get me on that fucking beach.
Look, hogging all the glory.
Bro, you make it hard, bro!
Well, like, it's actually an example where they took something from the book that's so much more dry when they do it. But like the way they have that, where they rush the beach really quickly and they get straight up to that temple, but then finally the other Greeks come and then it pushes the Troy back. That's actually dope as well. Because also, by the way, they do a really good job showing, Monty, that the Trojan armies get wins as well. And they have times that they're winning and pushing them back. I actually think they do a really good job showing in the movie that classic tragic idea of like, well, we almost won. It was like we were this close to winning, but then it all tumbled down. They do a great job of setting that up. Again, by the way, it's a classic Greek obviously hubris is all over this movie. It's all fucking over this film.
Yeah, and as like all the Swords and Sandals movies, I mean, the spectacle of it, that beach storming scene is amazing. I mean, the counterattack later by the Trojans when they're lighting the brush on fire, the brush balls, and like sending them down. That battle's amazing. But the costumes are fucking incredible in this movie. Just like in the other movies we've watched.
It's not just like 20 minutes of battle scenes, because that's one thing I actually think some films do suffer from. Like, the joke is, even Lord of the Rings actually does suffer in the massive battles. That's why they have to put all comedy scenes in and like, oh, it just missed me with a swinging thing, because otherwise how do you keep showing the set? What they do here is this, Monty. Every single battle is a totally different set piece and has a totally different dynamic to it. So it actually never gets boring, the action in this film, I personally found. I thought it was actually quite varied, the different types of battles you could have and the people having the battles.
The battles and duels are never boring in this film. It is maybe my favorite film ever for that.
The joke is we just want to do our own director's cut with the less is more philosophy and delete a lot of Orlando Bloom and Achilles like dialogue scenes.
I also would love to delete the ending.
Film. We would like a Chad director cut, basically. We would take out all the shit that women would like, basically.
I am going to tell a story.
Audiences, what do you like the most, girls? Right, take all that out the film. I think.
I am going to tell a story right now about the music behind this film, which I was telling Richard before this started.
We were talking about this just before you got here, Duncan, but it's like the score in this fucking movie stinks. It ruined the film for me in some areas.
Whoa. So if you guys watch the theatrical release instead of the director's cut, you'll notice that the score is different and is much better in the theatrical release. So what happened in this movie is a very strange affair. So basically, there was an original composer to this movie named Gabriel Yared, and he worked on the score. And then what happened is there was Richard, rather, you will appreciate that they got rid of this. There was a lot more of like wailing women. I know you loved that in the Dune 2 soundtrack. The wow. Apparently that was like, it was like full of that.
Oh, Christ. Yeah.
So what happened was that apparently in test screenings, the score was received very negatively. And so in 1 month, they killed this Gabriel Yared score. And in 1 month, James Horner, who's a famous film composer, then created a new score for this movie. All right. But part of the problem, apparently, was that Wolfgang Petersen, while it was better, he didn't really like this score. So when the director's cut came around, they went back to a lot of the placeholder music that they had put into the film prior to getting the James Horner score, because it was just like kind of mood pieces, including in the Hector Achilles duel. They actually used Danny Elfman's theme from Planet of the Apes, which is really weird and terrible. So I would encourage you, if you guys did watch the director's cut, you can go on YouTube and see the original music in that scene, and it's about 1,000,000 times better than James Horner music.
It is.
I showed it to Richard right before we started.
Yeah, I mean, not just that though, but I mean, like, you know how I was saying at the start about how like one of the areas in which the movie is strange is that they are doing theatrical delivery, and not every actor can kind of get there because they're maybe not classically trained or they've never done it before. But where it really jars is in the scenes where they're doing that theatrical delivery. We have this gigantic orchestral score in the background, like just fucking. You know what I mean? It's like the tone of the dialogue they're delivering with the the gravitas they're trying to put into it is totally offset by the background fucking noise. There's some absolutely horrendous scenes.
It also is pulled from other movies, so there's no consistency to it in the director's cut. So the music in the director's cut is a mess.
Yes,
and it is really bad. So it is like noticeably offensive at times. So even though the director's cut is cool because we get a bunch of additional scenes that I really like, it is worth seeing the theatrical release to hear the James Horner score because it's a lot more consistent. And frankly, it's just a lot more subtle. I mean, I'm sure Adanion, our editor, is going to like, I know he cares a lot about this kind of stuff. So I'm sure he's going to put in like the Hector Achilles duel where you can hear it. But it's like, it's kind of more like a subtle drum. And what it does is it allows the combat to really be the focus and the sounds of the swords and the spears to really breathe. And it feels a lot more real and much more pared down. It's way better.
Yeah, I mean, the director's cut improves the movie in some areas, mainly, as I said, with the connective tissue, the storytelling. There's some additional bits with Sean Bean, additional bits with Peter O'Toole. You know, all of this is good, right? And like, it didn't feel like a 3-hour, 15-minute long.
No, it
film.
actually flies by, really.
Yeah. It's pretty good for pacing in that sense. Certainly didn't drag like Spartacus did.
Spartacus felt
fair.
like 3 times as long as this movie.
Yeah, Spartacus was like watching a season of television. This was like just watching a 2-hour movie. So you know, pacing.
I also didn't find it felt too long. I found it actually the pacing was fairly good.
I thought it was fine.
Pacing was good. But what I will say is, in terms of the things that it gets wrong, the score is a nightmare. It is a nightmare. It ruins scenes that just could have, without any music, would have been fine. Would have been
always
way
tell
better.
people one of the things that is mad underrated about film is because in a way, music is invisible because it connects in your brain to the scene and what you're experiencing. You don't think about music when it's good. So I always tell people, like, we're going to do this obviously as our next film. The film Gladiator would be like, no joke, like 70% as good without that music. That music is one of the core. That's almost an actor in the film that fucking hands him a score. So like, I agree. That's that part. If you'd added it, that's probably one of the main missing parts of this being like a fucking 8 out of 10 film or something like.
Sure.
If you'd had better music, and again, Lord of the Rings, by the way, carried by the music. Like some of these films, music is so much of what makes these films great, especially you know what I mean. Epic.
There isn't an iconic.
No. I can't even think of it. Even though I only just saw, I can't even think of a refrain, mate. I can't think of a melody. Mez, you can instantly think of a Gladiator, a Lord of the Rings, you know, of course. Instantly.
Instantly. There's none of that here. And the other problem it has, and this obviously isn't unique to the director's cut, it's just in the director's cut, there's more of it. And that is that the director, Wolfgang Petersen. Now, Wolfgang Petersen, by the way, is a legend.
He's got some good films,
Well, he did Das Boot. He did
Enemy Mine.
Yep, there you go. Another 80s.
A lot of cult classics, some good films in there, mate.
But he also did
even the 90s thrillers he did, I thought were good.
He did that Dustin Hoffman virus movie as well, whatever the fuck that's called. He did
Outbreak or whatever.
Yeah.
That's a Michael Crichton one.
Oh, what am I thinking of then?
Yeah. No,
that's Andromeda Strain.
Yeah.
Sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
It is Outbreak, I think. But anyway, so Wolfgang Petersen's done like some really good genre movies down the years. Das Boot is one of the greatest movies ever made. It's certainly like arguably a top 100, 120 movie.
Yeah.
And yet
Also did the Never-Ending Story, so even in my youth he was a legend.
Falco. But obviously the problem with this movie is the way it is shot. Brad Pitt said in an interview he felt like he could never get out of the center of the frame, and that's what he was trying to do, is be more like, you know, nuanced and, you know, but like what
See, this is what guys don't really fuck with Brad Pitt. That just makes Brad Pitt sound like a CUNT. It's like, oh, am I like the main Hollywood actor, the big star, and I've been cast as Achilles in a film about Troy? Why is this all about me? I should just sort of be aside. Fuck you, Brad Pitt. You actual.
But I guess that's when he was entering like his phase where he actually wanted to act.
Right.
And the problem you've got is, it's like I said, tonally, well, visually, what I'm seeing visually, what the story that's being told to me visually is, here is glorious, brave Achilles, you know, close-ups on him every time he enters the scene, dashing with his hair and all of this stuff.
Looks like he's in a L'Oreal commercial. It's true.
Yeah, absolutely. But he isn't the hero. And there's also some very weird shots of like, am I leering at him? Is he eye candy for me? Is this Thelma and Louise?
My favorite cringe shot is that right when they're about to storm the beach, he takes his sword and he points his sword, and then they cut away from him, and then they cut back to him with the same shot in slow motion. And I'm like, what the fuck is that shot? It's just so gratuitous. Why are we cutting back to that? It's so weird.
Immortality! Take it! It's yours!
Yeah, but like I said, just the weird, like put it this way, like obviously it's not anything that would ever get picked up on because, you know, just power dynamics in Hollywood and what have you. But there's a lot of gratuitous shots of Brad Pitt that don't seem to necessarily serve anything else except to say, look how fucking ripped he is. Yeah, look.
Ironically, it's just him oiled up with bronzer like for half the film. It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, and what I'm saying there is
Joe Martian order, obviously, Monty.
Yeah, if this is a movie where it's a romantic movie and it is about like him and Briseis getting it together, and that's the direction they want to take it in, that makes a little bit more sense, right? Because
you can just imagine some a twat from Hollywood in a focus group like, we need a shot of his ass, get his bronze ass in the scene.
This is
his ass is right in there, dude. It's even more gratuitous than what's his face?
Why
from
couldn't
the Crown Thomas affair? The Crown Thomas affair had that ridiculous Pierce Brosnan's wooden ass in the light shot. The minute a young boy, by the way, that young boy who gets negged at the start, he's like 12, and he just opens it up. There's just two fully naked women, tits out on the bed, and Brad Pitt's unbelievable ass in his bed, and he's like, Achilles, it's time to fight Achilles. I love it. What is this scene, bro?
But this is the worst part, because all this had to be was some sort of highly homoerotic two ripped dudes, just Achilles and Patroclus going at it.
It should have been Achilles and Patroclus in bed. And then, by the way, you never need to address it ever again.
Yeah, of
if
course.
You're squeamish about that.
You could just infer it. Yeah, of course.
They're just there in bed naked, just two bros hanging out in the bed naked. We've all been there.
Actually, as we're saying, be more time appropriate active. It wasn't an idea with. It'd just be a thing. It's just a thing.
But also the whole Briseis thing and the fact that they have to make Brad Pitt eye candy and have this romance, probably, you know, one assumes for a female audience, ruins the movie. Because let me tell you how stupid the end of this movie is as a result of this. So obviously in the Iliad, Achilles actually dies before they even sack Troy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He just gets shot from the walls by Paris in another battle.
Apollo. Stop attributing it to Paris, he's a pussy.
That is also an area in this film that it gets really confused, because even though we acknowledge that the woman is in love with him and that's also a personal love story, they are literally storming, raping, and pillaging your people.
Yep.
You wouldn't be like, oh, but you're killing him. He's killing the whole culture, you lunatic. What are you talking about?
Horace!
There's so much wrong. So can we start with the fact that can we start with the fact that Achilles
That's like your mother getting ripped over there. And you're like, oh, my love had just died. Shit, why have you done that?
Take this sword, Aeneas.
So can we start with the fact that Achilles, who apparently really cares about having Briseis because he loves her and was super angry when Agamemnon took her, when Priam comes to retrieve Hector's corpse, he's like, oh yeah, Priam, you can have her back too. Now keep in mind, presumably Achilles thinks he's going to win this war. Now, what happens in the ancient world when you win a war and you break a siege? Does the whole city get burned? Yes. Do all the men get killed? Yes. Do all the women get raped? Yes. Do all the children get killed? Yes. Every time in ancient history, this is what happens, guys. So if he thinks he's going to win the war, and he loves Briseis, why is he sending her back into Troy? He's basically trying to kill her, by the way, which is crazy. And then he just runs around a city going, Briseis, as if he could find her, as if he could find her in the chaos of an entire city that is being looted and pillaged.
Why did he put like some Titanic ship? Like, I'll find you. Stop! Hey, stop ripping it. Have you seen that? Look, last I was with earlier.
They've not even built it up at any. It's one of the most undeserved romances I've seen in a movie because it's like a weird, sexless romance. Where
here's what I don't understand for real. I actually
she's a slave. She's a slave.
At the beginning, I actually thought they nailed the tone because the speech that everyone's seen put on social media a million times, where he gives that speech about the god, you will never be more beautiful than you are now because the gods envy us because essentially we exist in the material realm and we have fleeting like that.
They envy us because we're mortal. Because any moment might be our last. Everything's more beautiful. Because we're doomed.
That part's brilliant. I actually thought, oh, they've nailed it. That is what a warrior would be like. You have to live in the moment because you could die tomorrow. And the idea is you have to just like, essentially, that speech is the philosophical equivalent of that famous scenario if people have ever heard the story of you have to imagine life as you're a guy who's been chased off a cliff and at the top of the cliff there's a tiger. So if you go up, it'll kill you. And at the bottom of the cliff there's a tiger and it'll kill you if you go down. And you're just hanging on. And the story of life is as you're hanging on, you look over and as you're hanging on this branch, you see a little strawberry growing on the edge of a grass, and what you do is you just eat the strawberry. That's a metaphor for life. You're going from the birth to death, and in the middle you've just got to enjoy the moment. They nailed that. The problem there is why spin that out into this weird, like as I was saying, like teenage romance where it's like whatever happens I must get to you. Our love will live on in all eternity. Like that part is mad overwrought. Like that is out of some teenage girl's fucking diary, her fantasy or what. Like
it's so cringe, man.
I agree. It's so juvenile, that love, because I agree with you, Richard. They didn't make that epic enough at all. Essentially, here's what's mental about that even being inserted. Bro, you've inserted a counter-love narrative to the narrative that made the whole film happen of fucking Paris. And then, but obviously they're giving you nothing as actors. You can't fucking play that up. So like you've done some weird thing where you've focused on the other love narrative, but you haven't even made that epic. And like, as you're saying, the whole time she's basically just sort of like, you keep me imprisoned. You keep me in prison. You keep me. Oh, you let me go. Well, actually, maybe I just love you then. Fuck, maybe we should have been together. Like what? That's a 0 to 60. It's a mad one. I agree. I think they really badly handle that.
It also just undermines Achilles' entire character motivation with Patroclus, which makes it really weird.
He also just forgets about it pretty fucking quick, doesn't he? I know. Yeah.
He's my cousin. Yeah. That's totally what this is, and also as well, like.
Richard, it's not gay to fuck your cousin. Come on, man.
Listen, they can do whatever they want back then in antiquity. They're fine. But it's like, yeah, the fact that they recoil from that in the film as well. They do that stupid thing. I hate this in Sword and Sandals movies in particular, where it's like, right, the characters are gay. They are canonically gay. But like not gay in like the way we would think of it. Like Duncan was talking about, like this intense, like it's like he is my spirit animal.
Yeah, it's almost like a soulmate type thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, physical attraction. It's like genuine gay love. Like a gay couple would be getting married today.
Wasn't the literal line in Greek times something like, like women are for sex and children and men are for love. Wasn't that the fucking line back then? That's the idea. It's actually
women,
like, it's
women
higher
for
love.
breeding, women for breeding, men for sex, and a melon for pleasure or something.
I mean, the Spartans literally would just, because the Spartans lived in military units basically the entire time. And so the Spartans would just, the guys would just fuck each other in these military units, and they thought it was like a duty that they had to go back to like have kids with their wives, but it wasn't what they wanted most of the time.
What I hate about modern media is, as I said, it's like they either present it like it's queer as folk, and it's the old cliche of, oh bloody hell, gays are promiscuous, and it's just like, you know, the big gay warrior walks in, it's like, who's for bummins then, you know, like, and everyone's having sex with everyone else, right? And it's just really like, no, that isn't what classic literature is talking about. It is talking about like the profound love between two men. Like I say, more like they would get married. It's just back then you couldn't be married, so you had this insane platonic, spiritual kind of love, and it just so happened to be between men, right? And very often men that would go to war, and their love would be heightened by the fact that yes, they could die at any time. Now, one of the things I hate about modern media is they're so squeamish about just presenting genuine gay love like that, right? What they do is, let's have them have a play fight. Oh, fucking shoot me in the face, please. Like, got you. Ooh, nearly. Ooh, fell on you. Ooh, my sword nearly went in you. Didn't I?
Nervous? Petrified. You told me never to change sword hands.
What is this? Is it a
Some
carry-on film?
grab in a fucking fraternal house, man. All like,
it's like that entire scene with Patroclus and Achilles having that play fight. That is not what their love was about. It was so intense it caused Achilles to go fucking psycho, defile his own rules of law, and then he only walked it back in the Iliad because Patroclus appeared as a fucking ghost to him and said, "Come on now. You know, you're better than this, Achilles. Get your shit together." Like, you know, that's how intense the love was. But not cheeky play fight. Got you, cousin. Like, nah.
How dare Odysseus interrupt that?
On Troy. It is a bit like, ooh, cheeky.
Yeah. Miss me with that.
Be that old guy. Oh, Achilles, what you doing? That's ridiculous.
Whoopsie.
Yeah.
Sorry. Like, fucking grow up. Grow up. Play fights, indeed.
Also,
I hate that.
I'll just throw this out there. Even though, luckily, bear in mind who directed it, all the rest of it, I don't actually think this movie. I think one thing this movie does a fairly good job with is it does actually stay out of what I hate about modern epics, which is the modern epic is always just tied to like current geopolitics. It's like, no, why are you doing that? So, like, at least they didn't make this just like this is actually just a metaphor for going to Iraq in 2004. Like, they didn't. Thankfully, they didn't do that. They kept it actually fairly clean of all that, so it's not taken.
Yeah, like
Troy has WMDs. Troy has WMDs. We have to go stop the Trojans.
You're either with us or you're against us. Exactly. Now watch this drive. Stop playing golf, Agamemnon.
I know. You know, luckily, that's actually why I think, in a weird way, though, as we're pointing out this, I think this film, 20 years later, I think this film actually had to like age a bit before people were able to reevaluate it and appreciate it. Yeah. At the time, this is why I actually suggested this film. Bro, I have seen for like decades people slander this film and act like it was shit or like just some trash film with nothing redeeming about it. I've always thought, like, bro, I don't get it, because at a bare minimum, if you haven't watched the film yet and you watch all those nutters who just watched the episode, at a minimum, when you watch this film, you are going to pick at least 2 or 3 actors and just enjoy their performance alone. I guarantee it. Whether you like the film, whether you fuck with any of it, you will pick. Again, we've listed mainly most of them. Like there's like 6 or 7 really good actors in this film. You just pick 2 or 3, you can just vibe with that alone.
Low key. If you want a hipster pick for someone that's really good in this movie, it's my boy Nigel Terry, who plays King Arthur in one of my favorite movies, John Bowman's Excalibur. He plays the Trojan High Priest. The one who tells them to bring in the horse and
also
then gets
has
killed
which also has
he's wicked. He's got some wicked scenes.
He also has the funniest scene where he's trying to tell them not to kill him because he's a priest, and they just throw him off the tower.
Yeah.
Beware, my friends. I am a servant of the gods.
Yeah, he's brilliant. Like, I mean, put it this way: one of the biggest tragedies I think is because he was he Irish? No, Was he Irish originally? Oh, no, he is English. But anyway, he lived in London, and so he had all these opportunities coming out of like the 80s after doing Excalibur. He could have had all of these like, fantastic appearances. It never panned out for him. He never really got his due, because I think he's fucking great in Excalibur. And he has just this wonderful little bit part in here where it's like I was squinting going, fucking hell, it's him. And he's
I also
great.
thought they did actually in line with that, and a lot of I thought they did a great job with the sets, by the way, and what people looked like. I actually thought they actually didn't fall into that thing and make it look like just pantomime or stupid theatre. It actually looked fairly good. Like I found it like believable when I watched it.
The movie looks stunning. I actually couldn't. I actually couldn't recall how good this movie looked.
Yes,
because I obviously went to see it in the cinema when it came out. And like a lot of people, I just filed it under, well, it was okay. Never going to rewatch that. Shout out Brian Cox, the best Hannibal Lecter one time, and just left it there in the vestiges of my brain. Rewatching I've never seen the director's cut. It's the first time watching the director's cut, but the movie is actually fucking gorgeous. Like there's just something about it like that you don't really get in a lot of movies these days. It's like the production value is crazy good. Like it's
like the lighting's mega. It looks awesome, doesn't it? Yeah, the background details,
costumes,
even things like making the walls of Troy look huge.
Yeah.
Look, I'm not a huge fan of what they did with the Trojan horse, but that's not bad. That's, by the way, there's another thing. Anyone who makes this film, you're gonna have a really hard time portraying the Trojan horse. Obviously, that is a very mythological concept that doesn't fully work in the real world, but you have to go along with it in the same ways you can't really go, how does Batman pull up the tires on the Batmobile? You have to understand the Batmobile is sort of not a real thing, isn't it? So, but even so, they still, like, in light of what they're trying to do, they still sort of nail it.
I like the fact that it's made out of like ship pieces and driftwood. I think it looks really cool.
Yeah, because obviously they, it was cobbled together at the last minute, so it was what they would have to hand. It was a nice little detail, nice little bit of what you call now world building.
Two of the things I would have thought you would never be able to nail in this film, I think they killed it, is like I said, one, the idea, Monty, that Troy is unassailable. It's these giant walls, you can't get back. They do a really good job with that. And then secondly, because of how they set the battles up, and as we're saying, they're not just CGI'd, you do get this feeling that in front of the fucking Troy is this giant battle area where you can have enormous armies. You get this sense of scale, actually. They do. I agree with you guys. That's actually why in this arc, this modern film does deserve to be coupled with those ones where we've given massive praise to Ben-Hur and Spartacus for having these giant extras of enormous armies and huge scenes where it's all real. This film is sort of like the last of that lineage for me. Yeah, nowadays in a modern film, you would just sadly do that thing. If you don't know, by the way, supposedly behind the scenes, actually being like a graphics editor guy now is one of the most depressing jobs in Hollywood, because for real, the director guys don't know how hard it is to do that, Monty, and they really just go like, well, just do that in post. And they just keep saying that over and over again. And then you're just the guy like, oh my God, I've got 2 weeks to make like 17. It's
also why a bunch of it looks so bad, is because it's so badly planned, and because they do just say that. It's also why Villeneuve's Dune movies look so good, because even though they use a lot of CGI, it's beautiful in those movies and it looks very real, because apparently Villeneuve is just way better at planning those sequences. Right. So it's not like we'll fix it in post. He has a very specific vision.
You can get away with it in sci-fi in a way that you can't get away with it in Sword and Sandals, I think.
I don't know, mate. Some of those fucking Marvel movies look awful.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, but also that's more about kind of an aesthetic that they're going for. You know what I mean? Whereas it's like the Dune CGI stuff is great, but it's okay in like a future 40,000 fucking years ahead or whatever, if some stuff does have that uncanny valley, like not quite real effect to it, because it just sort of fits in with the weirdness of the world. One of the things I always hate about Sword and Sandals is, and it's one of the reasons why I fucking hated Gladiator 2, the CGI, when you put stuff in a movie that, like, when you've got CGI extras and it's very clearly like copy pasted people, slightly different uniforms to create a sense of scale, or in Gladiator 2, the animal battles, which are fucking diabolical. It's like you can tell immediately that it's bad, and it just takes you out of it. What Troy does incredibly well is at no point do I feel like there is an artificiality to what's happening on the screen.
No, it looks really real.
It looks and feels real in a way that, like, something like the History Channel season of Vikings, which was hindered by skill because of budget constraints. But everyone in it was real. They were all wearing costumes. They were all holding a sword. They were all walking and moving at speed, at pace. Now, if you scale that up, and the budget on this film was insane. We're talking, especially for 2004, it's like $160 million movie. If you scale that up, that's always going to look good. Because it's real. It's what happened. It's how it would be. It's like when you see those battle reenactments and things like that. And that's essentially what they do here. So I love the fact that everything is practical in this film. And when you take the gorgeous vistas, the really good costume design, the costume design's fantastic in this movie. Set design is fantastic in this movie.
Fight choreography.
The fight choreography is fantastic. When you take all of that, what you've got is probably, in this century, one of the things I'll definitely say about Troy is for this type of film, a sword and sandal movie, some of the best battle scenes, like you're probably ever going to see recorded in the genre. Gladiator, even the opening fight scene in Gladiator, where they're in the woods, there's some clever shot usage there and some CGI. And this is just all practical, and you feel it, and it feels really real. And as I said, I've forgotten how brutal some of these fight scenes were. Like, spears are just going through motherfuckers' heads. It's not like the cliche,
the Iliad is very descriptively brutal.
It's one of those battles which I hate, where someone's just doing 1,000 parries of every blow with a sword. They give you a sense in this film, like death does come in any instant. If you miss, the guy gets you, mate. Yeah. They nail that part. The skill. That's also why, actually, when they show in the battle scenes, like Patroclus does die, they actually just do a really good job of giving you a sense of death is real.
The wound he takes to the throat.
It's wild, isn't it?
Gross as fuck, innit? Like they've done a mega job there. That's like out of a horror movie.
And I'll tell you what, we even forgot this. I can't even believe we forgot this. Bro, bearing in mind, I already knew the story, Monty. So I know every time, even with suspension of disbelief, that I know that isn't actually Achilles. Holy fuck, are they amazing how they film those scenes where it makes it look like he is. Even to your eyes, they make it look, because it's just quickly enough done off his face that all you see is the helmet. It really does. Like, you can totally believe that the Eric Bana Hector character thinks that is fucking Achilles. I was thinking to myself, how are you going to pull that off? They do. Somehow they pull it off with clever, like, framing or blocking or something in the scene. They do that job really well, I think.
It's also the actor does a really good job of mimicking the run of Brad Pitt and some of the way he moves as well, which is also mentioned by his lieutenant, the Myrmidon lieutenant. I forget what his name is, where he says, like, he moved like you, so how could we have known?
Eyeshadow. Who really big fan of the 80s and The Cure.
He looks great. Whatever. Makes his piercing blue eyes more blue.
The thing, he's manly as fuck, but holy shit, has he got an hand with that eyeliner though? That little pencil. He must have got that for Christmas. Fucking hell. I agree though. That's actually a subtle part of the money. They do absolutely nail the like fake Achilles part of the film. That part is flawless. Yeah, it's really well done.
Yeah, it is. And as I said, I think obviously as well, I think one of the things I'll definitely say is in terms of some of the story decisions they made to make the movie work with its own internal logic, they make a lot of good decisions. Like, look, they just said at the start, we're not going to be faithful to the text.
Well, I mean,
we're just not.
We didn't mention this, but this is written by David Benioff, who would then go on to become the showrunner of Game of Thrones, infamously, right? But you can, if you are a Game of Thrones fan, you can see a lot of Game of Thrones in this movie, I think.
Sure. Well, and as I alluded to as well, I mean, he cribbed some elements from classics for Game of Thrones, which, it's obviously like, George R.R. Martin, when he was writing it, he was basing it on kind of like medieval British history to create all of the analogs and things like the Red Wedding and all of that stuff. But I mean, look, if you're gonna steal, you steal from the best. I mean, and obviously there's a reason these texts have endured throughout history. They tell classic stories of hubris and failure and fate and all of these incredible, big ideas that are at the heart of any modern story. But what I will absolutely say about Benioff is, unfortunately, he is devolved into an absolute hack, and this happens on a long enough time scale. Like, but people don't know this. He got he won awards for a screenplay, which was a Spike Lee movie called The 25th Hour.
It's a mad underrated film, right? It's a really good
Correct.
film. Yeah,
correct. And it's basically Ed Norton. It was probably some of Ed Norton's last best work before he became a bit of a self-parody. It's got Philip Seymour Hoffman in it as well, who, you know, taken too soon. Brian Cox is in it as well. And it's just a really tight script about a dude who is going to prison and, you know, he's going to get taken away in the morning. And it's his last night out with his friends before he either makes the decision to run away or
really good. Yeah.
Yeah. And that screenplay is fantastic. It is fantastic. And then he went on to do this. And then fast forward a few years and he's doing X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yes.
And his Star Wars trilogy is canceled.
He clearly did become a hack, but he did it. He chose to be. That's the sad part here. This is someone who sold out. Yeah. I agree with you. That actually shows real. This film and 25th Hour show real, actual fucking promise. Like, you actually maybe could have been a great script writer or something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it just, you know, just ended up bad. And look, I don't hate the early seasons of Game of Thrones. I think they're really good television. But what you have to remember there is, as much as he can take the credit for the writing, they were just putting George R.R. Martin's, like the words of George R.R. Martin, the dialogue that he wrote on the screen. And the scenes, if you've read the books, you know, they're down there in the background. You might be able to see them. I mean, I've read the books, and it's not a coincidence, and I know everybody said it, but it's not a coincidence that the minute George R.R. Martin's like, right, you're on your own now, here's some story notes of where I might take it if I ever do finish the book. And they've gone, yep, gotcha, and they ruin everything. And it's like, yep, that's just the sad reality, unfortunately. I mean, he's, like you say, he's somebody that had so much promise early on as a writer, and then just, I don't know, just pissed it all away, and he's a hack. But this might represent some of his last best work, because to adapt something like the Iliad for a modern American audience at a time when the kind of modern epic was just coming back into cinema, you know, it's a tall order. You have to
to have it make as much money as it did. I think the most shocking thing about this was that it made $500 million. I mean, this was really financially successful.
Well, again, if you look at the marketing at the time, Warner Brothers went fucking crazy, and they even sent it to the Cannes Film Festival, where it got good reviews. And that's kind of the interesting thing with this film. The reviews at the time were very mixed. People seem to recall that it was like panned by the critics, but that isn't quite true. They were just as confused as everybody else about what the film was trying to do, particularly because they didn't get the benefit of a director's cut until 2007. In 2004, they just had the same theatrical cut that we all got, and it was a confusing movie. This was a movie that had elements that were A+. In terms of performances and scenes and dialogues and one-liners and the cinematic nature of the battles and what have you. But then it had other aspects that were like a fucking F, like absolute clunkers, cheesy ending, love stories that don't make sense or go anywhere, you know, and a squeamishness about the source text when it comes to why would Achilles lose his mind over Patroclus and stuff like this. And so in the end, they sort of settled on a C. It was a C movie where a lot of the elements got a lot of high praise. Our fourth horseman, Roger Ebert, he gave this 2 out of 4 and said that Brad Pitt brought a modern, nuanced and introspective performance to the character of Achilles.
Which nobody wants, by the way.
Well, he's just unfortunately, that just is interpreted as the hero of the movie is an arsehole, and I don't know how to feel about the film for 3 hours. That's
you know, the sad thing is,
unfortunately, where it ended up.
Unfortunately, my experience with this show and being constantly exposed to the opinions of Roger Ebert sadly make me almost be able to relate to people who hate me, because I can't even just say like I want to say. I just disagree with him. I actually hate him now. I actually everything I hear, the more I hear, the more I hate him. You know, I just despise the guy.
I mean, put it this
He's
way:
wrong about everything.
I've got the his review here. So I'll just read you some of the review as we like to do here, to just denigrate this man from in death. Just hopefully his widow's not like alive and like tuning into this, because why do you hate my sweet Roger? But anyway, Pitt is a good actor.
Listen, Roger Ebert envies us because we're still alive. Anyway, see how it's going with that. You know?
No, I do. I do see it. Pitt is a good actor and a handsome man, and he worked out for 6 months to get booked.
Why did he put that in there? And a handsome man too. Okay, Roger, what a minute.
But Achilles is not a character he inhabits comfortably. Say what you will about Charlton Heston and Victor Mature, but one good way to carry off a sword-and-sandal epic is to be filmed by a camera down around your knees, while you intone quasi-formal prose in a heroic baritone. Pitt is modern, nuanced, introspective. He brings a complexity to the role where it is not required. By treating Achilles and the other characters as if they were human, instead of the larger-than-life creations of Greek myth, the director, Wolfgang Petersen, miscalculates. What happens in Greek myth cannot happen between psychologically plausible characters. That's the whole point of myth. Great films like Michael Kakianis' Electra about the murder of Agamemnon after the Trojan War know that and use a stark dramatic approach that is deliberately stylized. Of course, Electra wouldn't work for a multiplex audience, but then maybe these types of stories shouldn't. The best scene in the movie has Peter O'Toole creating an island of drama and emotion in the middle of all that plodding dialogue. He plays old King Priam of Troy, who at night ventures outside of his walls into the enemy camp, surprising Achilles in his tent. Achilles has defeated Priam's son Hector in hand-to-hand combat before the walls of Troy, dragged his body back to camp in his chariot, and now Priam asks that the body be returned for proper preparation and burial. The scene is given the time and attention it needs, and we believe it when Achilles tells Priam, "You're a far better king than the one who leads this army." O'Toole's presence is a reminder of Lawrence of Arabia, which I watched 2 weeks ago before this film, and which proved that patience with dialogue and character is more important than action when it comes to making war movies work. So, I don't disagree with this review here. I for once, me and Roger Ebert are in alignment, I think.
Look, I think this movie, I think my final thoughts on this are as follows. This movie is a paradox because the reasons why I hate it is that it's Hollywoodified. But if it hadn't been Hollywoodified, it never would have gotten the budget to offer me the epic, all the cast, the epic scope of it. So as annoying as the Briseis stuff is, if I have to trade that to get like Brian Cox's Agamemnon performance and Peter O'Toole's Priam performance, I'm willing to make these trades.
Let it burn! Let Troy burn! Burn it! For Menelaus!
Right.
Oh, by the way, Monty, along the lines of what you're saying, I am also pretty sure you just wouldn't get this specific cast if you hadn't come on the heels of Lord of the Rings, Gladiator. This is, you know how actors are, mate. They just know you go where the shit that's popular. What's great is, like, in fact, one of the biggest problems actors have is they will often work with a great director, but the point is they wanted to work with him for a movie he did in the past, but they're working on one now that's not as good. They're classic for doing that. So, like, in a way, like, I also think the timing of when this movie came out is why you get this cast too. Like, everyone's jumping on to be in the next big epic. That's what they think they're doing, I think.
And like the battle sequences and all of the costumes and the extras and the immensely good shots of Troy and the realization of the world, all of this was powered by money, right? And I don't think that they were ready to greenlight a big budget picture that has Brad Pitt fucking his male cousin as the primary romance, right? And so here we are. I do think this movie has actually aged really well. I've watched this film now twice in probably the last 6 months, and I enjoyed it every time I watch it, even if the ending makes me roll my eyes. I can really easily ignore that to take the 3 hours of actually good stuff that's here.
Yeah, I mean, look, I enjoyed it, not for the film itself, not for the story it told. I found a lot of it very unsatisfying in terms of arcs and story development, and also being not a classicist in the same way that Monty is, but knowing it a little bit and liking that kind of stuff. Obviously, it doesn't satisfy on that level. either. It is essentially it is a sword and sandals film without any of the mythological elements associated with the source text attached to it, which I think is a shame, because I think the best things about those kind of texts are the mythological aspects. That's what I like. But what I do love about this film, other than the fact that it looks gorgeous, is it's just got a bunch of like actors that get their scenes. They get their scenes. They get their dialogue. They get their moments, and they get to act. And that is one of those things where it's like, when you have big ensemble casts like this, it's very much often a directorial flaw, where not everyone has that moment, not everyone has that scene. It can go, like how in The Thin Red Line, it wasn't it Adrian Brody, he got cut out of the movie entirely, right? Because
I think it was Billy Bob Thornton, wasn't it? Am I wrong on that one?
I can't remember. I'm gonna have to look this up.
I know you are right. The problem is they filmed like 8 hours of footage, and there was someone famously went to the premiere.
Yeah.
I wasn't even in it or something like that. I think Adrian Brody was the one who was like wandering having the thoughts gone. I think it was Billy Bob Thornton. Who was it? Have a look.
Yeah, it says here. Apparently, Adrian Brody suffered from the final cut the most.
Oh, fair enough.
He was one of the main characters in the shoot, but the theatrical cut reduced him to a background character.
Oh, right, fair enough.
So this is just one of those things where it's like, when you're doing these big like movies where you have these ensemble casts, not everyone gets the moments that you have to understand. It's a shoot, so they've acted these scenes, but they end up on the cutting room floor, or they don't go in, or there's not enough room. Even The Lord of the Rings, which is held up as a great trilogy, the theatrical release criminally cut out the death of Saruman, this essential scene. He's built up as the big bad all through the second film, and then you don't even have a conclusion to that story arc outside of the extended editions on DVD and Blu-ray, and that's a criminal oversight. So it can be very, very hard to fit everything in. I think this movie does. Yeah, you could have more of Sean Bean, but every time Sean Bean is talking on screen, it's a banger. Sure, you could have had more of Agamemnon, Brian Cox going fucking nuts and being a villain, but every time he's on screen, words coming out of his mouth, it's brilliant. It's great to listen to. He understands the tone. If anything, you could probably have took a little bit off Achilles and given it to some of these other actors. Peter O'Toole steals the fucking show. Maybe Brendan Gleeson as well, to some extent. All of these actors get to do these incredible things. And even though Orlando Bloom is Scipio's leg day and is just a cowering pussy for the entire movie until at the end, when he grows a hair out of nowhere, and I hate it. But he's actually perfectly cast in this film. And the only actor for me that I was like, it's kind of a shame, was Eric Bana. I know that's like
I liked Eric Bana in this.
It's not that I dislike him. It's not that I dislike him. There was just something. I don't know. There was just something not.
I sort of know what you mean. As someone who actually, I love this performance. I know what you mean, though. But this way, what he doesn't do is, if I do contrast him delivering the lines to Brian Cox, Peter O'Toole, he doesn't almost, like you're saying, do the Shakespearean theatrical. He doesn't add the extra bit of English on it, as it were. He just sort of sings it like it's a movie. He just says his lines,
And obviously, he was, he was still a relatively green actor.
Yeah, true.
He burst onto the scene with Chopper, which was just fucking mega.
Definitely check that out if you haven't seen it. Great movie.
Yeah, he was the first Hulk as well.
Yeah, exactly. He'd done that before Troy, and obviously that was. It's an Ang Lee movie, which, put it this way, it's definitely better than the one with Ed Norton. Still,
yeah,
I'll die on that hill.
It's got some redeeming qualities.
I hope it's not Batman Returns all over again. But maybe I need to watch it before I commit to that. But I mean, like, look. He definitely grew very quickly in stature. I just felt maybe a movie of this kind of gravity was perhaps a little bit too early in his CV, maybe, and that's all. But like the character of Hector, there is a quiet nobility to him. He looks
awesome,
perfect. He looks perfect. I mean, he's a physical specimen in this movie it's like, okay, he's not on some Brad Pitt shit. Brad Pitt's like just insane. But he certainly, keep in mind, Brad Pitt was coming off being cut from Fight Club, and he was just like, Tyler Durden, his body fat, he just doesn't have any. It's like insane. But, Eric Bana's in fucking wicked shape in this film, and is conceivably a kind of good adversary for Achilles. If it wasn't that Achilles was invincible. So there's lots I like about his performance here. It's just like I say, I think when you go from Brian Cox, juice, the walls, you know, and then it's like, and Eric Bana's gone, and you would destroy Troy. It's not quite. It's just not.
Yeah, I agree.
It just doesn't pop in the same way that the classic Thespians did. That's my only critique in terms of the acting in the film, with the exception, of course, of, you know the ones, the people who aren't acting in this film. Everyone else is doing a really good job, but like Diane Kruger is fucking cheeks.
Ironically, I'm not even joking. Just because of casting, like somehow he is fairly well cast in most of these films. Orlando Bloom, for someone who, as far as I can tell, has no acting talent, has been in a lot of fucking good films. Holy shit, this guy's been in a lot. I've never seen a film where he was... By the way, we'd even say this beforehand. If people don't know, I actually do have a soft spot for the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven. He's the worst part about it. Like, he's trash. Like, you put a better actor in, that movie goes up like 2 points or something, mate. Like, no, it's actually unbelievable how he gets in all these films, mate. Like, it's bonkers.
Yeah, it is kind of wild. I mean, one of the things that's kind of weird about Orlando Bloom in general as well is, like, I think he was just meant to be like a kind of a heartthrob kind of character, and then because he was like Legolas, all of a sudden he's an action guy.
Don't get it at all.
Well, and then he was in Pirates of the Caribbean, where he was an action guy for that entire saga, basically.
But put it this way, you want to know what's really weird is, I agree, I think he's a dog shit actor, but I do like that he's game as fuck to do. Apparently he does like all of his own stunts and stuff like that, and you know, he does get stuck in on the set, and he wants to like contribute, but yeah, he can't act. He's diabolical.
There's a famous line that he said, right, where he apparently, and one thing a lot of people don't know about Lord of the Rings is because a lot of big actors in that film weren't at a point where they were giant name actors, they became famous because of that film. A lot of them say actually like that you didn't get paid loads of money. So he famously says, I didn't get paid much to do Lord of the Rings. I got like 40 grand. And my joke is, 40 grand too much, dickhead, but whatever.
It's all right. He got the bag from Pirates of the Caribbean 100%. So
also he must have made a fortune in like merchandising and imaging, right? Surely he had that in his contract if he's taking 40 grand. But I mean, look, he did have some good, he had some all right bits in Lord of the Rings. And honestly, when he's cowering all pathetic, going, no, brother, no, but he's just like cradling Eric Bana's ankles.
Yeah, true.
While Brendan Gleeson is going, what is this? What is this? Is this it? Is this what Troy has?
That's the indignation. It's fucking fire in it. That's a great scene.
You coward! Fight me! We have a pact. Fight!
Fight him, son.
Coward!
Fight him.
Yeah, that is a great scene, and Orlando Bloom contributes just by virtue of being the pathetic
whimpering
twink that he is. So, you know, so I don't know. Maybe like, much like Achilles, maybe he has a charmed life himself. Maybe he got dipped into the river of fucking blockbuster movies, where he will always be in movies that make $1 billion at the box office, even though
as long as there's not the Achilles heel of him actually being required to act in order to make the film successful. As long as that's the case, he's invulnerable. Yeah, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, so
as you say, Richard, but wait, Orlando, why would you attempt to be in these giant movies when you have no acting skill? That sounds like you could get made fun of. That's why no one will remember your name.
Exactly. That is why no one will request your autograph. So, yeah, I mean, listen, you know, like I say, in this movie, I didn't hate him. In general, I think he has a tendency to stink up the movies he's in, with the exception of Lord of the Rings and this. But the fact that I was already primed to be like, fucking hell, guys, you're gonna make me watch 3 hours of Orlando Bloom, mercifully barely in the film, really. And the only part I hate of the movie, like actually vitriolically hate, is the end. And the last like 10 minutes of this movie is ass. Director's cut, theatrical cut, there's no saving it. And unfortunately, Orlando Bloom turning up at the end and peppering Achilles with fucking arrows as he walks towards him like an absolute moron, when he had been the swerve master, the last style bender before that.
That scene you've seen in a million movies with a gun where they shoot you once, but you still keep walking, you won't go down. Another one. By the way, if you don't know, the worst part about this scene where he dies with the arrows is it's just a way worse version version of Boromir getting shot with all those arrows by that Urukai, which is just a better version of that scene. Like, you've already done that. It's even a better scene.
Also,
you're not even as good as Sean Bean out of the movie.
You have nailed it right at the end, Duncan. Also, shout out for a movie where Sean Bean doesn't die. That's one of the fucking great parts. You come into this movie and you see Sean Bean laughing and joking at the start, and all of cinema history has primed you. Go, oh, I really like Sean Bean already. He's gonna die, isn't he? No, wrong. He's Odysseus. And who would? What a coincidence that an Odyssey happened to someone called Odysseus. And
those jokes on the internet are killing me about the Christopher Nolan movie. Like, people not understanding that is just outrageous.
It's so crazy. But anyway, like, so at least we get Sean Bean at the end giving that mega speech. So,
but by the way, I just have to ask this question because some of the tweets that I've seen have been by British people who are saying, not everybody learns what you Americans learn in school, where you learn about the Odyssey. Surely you guys learned about the Odyssey in school, right?
I mean, I don't know if I learned about it in school.
I did it in college. Yeah, I did it in college.
But I do know that when me and Duncan were growing up, Ulysses 31 was a mega cartoon.
Oh, sure.
Used to be on.
It was a sci-fi. I think we talked about this before. It's like it's what's mad is it's a sci-fi reimagining of the Odyssey, Monty. But for example, his ship still looks like a galleon. Like, so it's exactly the sort of trash 80s cartoon that's like underratedly good. It was kind of fun.
No, it is a mega cartoon, and he has to fight the Cyclops. There's even stuff in there where he again, what's it's Sisyphus, isn't it, with the boulder?
Yes.
He meets him in one of these things. It's
like all the Poseidon's in it.
I'm surprised because
basically, for some reason, at the start, Ulysses has angered the gods. I don't even know what the fuck he did, because it explains it. The title sequence is mega. It's like got this like he's got his own theme tune. Ulysses, flying all through the galaxy.
It's a bagger theme tune. Yeah, look it up.
It's absolute bagger, right? And it explains. It's just like Zeus or someone at the start. Obviously, they mix up the Greek and the Roman and all this all the time. And it says, "You dare defy the gods?" And he sends all of the crew asleep. And it's just him and his two kids and a robot called No, because it's the 80s and kids have to have a lovable robot. And they're just flying through space, having all of the Greek myths encountered. Well, so I fucking loved it. What I'm trying to tell you, I loved the Odyssey as a kid.
Monty, your problem is this: it's a class distinction. The famous thing about a classical education is that it's only for the elites, mate. So every prime minister who'd ever lived in England will definitely have read the Odyssey. If you don't know, a famous thing about Boris Johnson that proves he is not an idiot is he can, from rote, actually read off a bunch of ancient Greek of the Iliad. He can just remember it all. He's clear. Actually, if you don't know, he's like a wrestling character. He plays a buffoon on camera to get away with everything. But it's actually a famous thing that, since we're working class, Monty, that's not the sort of thing they taught in our school. Like in our school, English was just Shakespeare or like a famous novel. That's it. You never got into this stuff, unfortunately. Like they never went. And history, by the way, is actually a nightmare in England if you're in working class. It's just like the most like surface level covering of like World War II, the Tudors, shit like that. So unfortunately, if you do the Greeks, you don't do these myths.
The best part is when you're a working class kid in a British school learning about the Industrial Revolution, which they love to teach, and it's like, this is the thing that has destroyed your lives. Remember, do you know why your granddad died of an industrial illness? Now let us have a look at what used to happen in Victorian England, and it's like fucking hell, So
I mean, I had to read it in high school. It was mandatory. The Odyssey was mandatory reading for me. I think I had to read it over a summer 1 year in high school. So anyway, I was just surprised.
To be fair, when I got to college, which isn't college like Americans call it college, it's like it's the bit before you go to university. You have 2 years of college basically in Britain. When I got there, and I was doing English literature, we obviously got to read like loads of mega stuff. And obviously we're not doing the Iliad in an English literature A level, but what we would do there is we would do like classic texts that reference it. Like when we did Paradise Lost, obviously you're going all through antiquity with all of that shit. So that but not until you're 16. even touching that stuff. Like in a working class school in Britain, it's like
I was probably 16 when I was assigned this.
Fair.
I had already read it, but when I was assigned this, I was in high school. So
yeah, you learn about the wars that destroyed your towns. You learn about the mines that destroyed your lives, and you learn to be a good automaton to come out the end. I mean, they made it slightly better than when our parents went to school, because they used to have to do, you just get put in like, oh, well, you're a moron, so woodwork for you, I guess. Like that. Like, they literally did that. Our entire educational system was divided up in, you're capable of reading, you go over here. You're capable of leading, you go to a private school. You are going to do menial labor. But I don't want to. No, woodwork and metalwork for you, my friend. That's how it used to work. That was just how they did things over here. So anyway, so the Iliad, I mean, look, One thing I'll certainly give the movie praise for, it makes a very difficult text that Duncan's right. I think a lot of Zoomers, a lot of younger people, they might bounce off it if they were to sit down and read it today. It's definitely something you might want to build up to with some other classic texts. I always say if you want to read
those supplementary books that helps you sort of understand things and tells you what the references are, do one of those ones too.
Yeah. I always say a good starting place if you want to read something that's classics and related to mythology and interesting is Ovid's Metamorphoses.
Metamorphoses. Yeah.
That's also a really good place to start.
Even though the Odyssey happens after the Iliad, the Odyssey, I think most people find a more readable book, because the Iliad is literally just a million descriptions of battle, and you have to be super into it in order to really enjoy it. I love the Iliad. I prefer it to the Odyssey, but I think most people, the Odyssey, they find more compelling because it's more of a modern narrative, like modern style narrative.
Yeah, and, as I said, it's like Odysseus is one of the best fucking characters they ever made. You know what I mean? Like, he just fucking rules. He literally is like an insane literary invention. So sadly underused in this movie. But overall, if I was to give this movie a rating, it's a 6.5, 7 out of 10. It's got huge glaring flaws in the movie, but at the end of the day, what you have to understand is now, especially, a lot of the cast have died, right? Somewhat depressingly. Some of the older thespians and some of the other bit part roles, they're all dead. Nigel Terry's gone. There's a guy in it called John Shrapnel, who's Nestor in this movie. He's dead. He's gone.
Peter O'Toole.
Shakespeare actor, obviously Peter O'Toole.
Peter O'Toole looks about one day from death in this film. That's how you know he's a great actor.
I know, like,
he's just killing it. His eyes look so reamed out. It's mental, mate.
And obviously, and unfortunately, just by the reality of it, Brian Cox is an actor that never really got as appreciated as he should have been in his lifetime. He's done, and obviously he is old now.
It's kind of like a diss to his career that he became famous just for his TV work at the end of his career in America. What all the movies, you fuckers? Because I'm with you. Look, he is good in Succession, but he's amazing in these films too. He's like a mega actor.
I mean, as I said, he'll always be the correct portrayal of Hannibal Lecter for me. Like, Anthony Hopkins is someone I got a lot of love for. Obviously, he's Welsh, like he's a national treasure. But he's too hammy with all of that nonsense, right? The chilling talk to you straight while I am scheming a way to get out of prison and get to your home, Dr. Hannibal Lecter in Manhunter. Like, Brian Cox nailed it. And he's done so many good films people haven't seen. The Escapist about him breaking out of prison, and it's like a remake of The Occurrence at Owl Creek. It's great. So yeah, anything with Brian Cox in is going to be good. And this movie, you get your portion of Cox. In more ways.
I'll just say this. Like Monty, I already was biased going into this because I wanted to see a really cool version of this story, or can they nail some of the beats that are really awesome? And as I say, I think the whole Hector arc is fabulous in this film. I think, like I said, they give the Trojans some wins as well. They set him up as this man of virtue and character who fights on him when he knows he's doomed, and because essentially that's philosophical in itself. That's life. You will definitely die in the end. You cannot ultimately win. But the point is, how did you live your life? That really is the measure of a man. man. Like, I think they nail that. The ending, like I said, I think it's fucking fabulous. Like that actual like soliloquy at the end is genuinely like moving. One of the best ones I've seen on film. By the way, think about how hard fucking epics are to end. The joke of Lord of the Rings is they just gave everyone an ending. Like this end's actually really tight, aside from the whack bit before we say about Aeneas and also, like I said earlier, in the Iliad, it doesn't have the sack of Troy. They just put that in because a Hollywood audience has to see an ending. They can't have it just end with Priam coming and going, I need his body. But even though, by the way, that's a fabulously moving scene too. You could have ended it there if you'd have been bold, but instead you set up this sequel and you do this part. But essentially, I would describe it like this. I sort of agree with Richard. I wouldn't give this some crazy rating, but I would say this. I think this is like a 7 out of 10. It's a guilty pleasure. But what I would say is if it's a 3-hour film, 2 hours of it are an 8 out of 10. The problem is the other hour, but it's not a whole hour. It's sprinkled among it. Is like a fucking 5 out of 10 or a 6 out of 10. And there are parts that get ropier. But I think one of the parts we really nailed is things like the aesthetics, the battle sequences, I think are absolutely fucking phenomenal. Like I say, I think those those have aged fabulously as the CGI shit's taken over the world. Like those look better now than they even seemed to me at the time. So I think this is a real flawed gem. There are real parts in this that are definitely worth watching. It's definitely at least worth one watch, put it out there.
Yeah. And like I said, I watched it for fun a few months ago before we had decided to do this. And then I watched it again today. And it was still very entertaining. Like, I don't regret watching this movie twice in the last 6 months. I'll watch it again in the future. You know what I mean? I like to come back to this movie in spite of its flaws. So,
yeah,
hope you guys enjoy it.
I don't feel like I'll watch this movie for another 20 years. But that's fine.
Here's the thing, I guarantee you will watch this movie again when Brian Cox dies. There's my prediction.
Well, listen, I'm trying not
you'll go back and you'll reappraise his career and you'll watch this movie again,
what I will go back and watch when Brian Cox dies is I will go back and rewatch Deadwood for the umpteenth time is what I will do. So,
by the way, I've done this a million times on some of the Insight. Whenever anyone asks for shows to recommend, first of all, I don't recommend The Wire because I know that's recommending something that Azuma will never watch. There's no way, they can't even get through 2 episodes of that show, Richard. There's too many names, too many plot lines, and that is essential to enjoying it. But I'll tell you what, the underrated banger that no one ever remembers, everyone knows The Sopranos, it is Deadwood. Deadwood is somehow the forgotten classic prestige TV show, because it is mega if you don't know. And like Brian, it's just filled with amazing character actors. Like, I like Ian McShane from American Gods. You're about 15 years late, dickhead. He was mega in Deadwood. He's unbelievable in that. He's unbelievable.
And Brian Cox in that plays like an actor who's like wandering. So he's an actor in the Wild West, putting on plays. He's an Irish immigrant, and obviously he's like, he talks all flowery and this, but he's got a switchblade, and you better watch your fucking ass around this motherfucker because you just had to be a hard person in the frontier at times, and that wonderful contrast. It's just food for a great actor like him. So
the reason that show is mega is it's filled with character actors. It's just people who are mega at doing like their own, working on their own little corner of the show, and it's just a banger. Anyway, he's a great actor.
We need an excuse to work Deadwood.
Yes.
That's what we need.
I would definitely go rewatch it, man. It's a mega show.
We could just call it Cocksuckers. And it's just us reviewing episodes of Deadwood. By the way, if you don't understand that is the go-to insult in Deadwood. Everyone just gets called a cocksucker all the time. Probably one of the reasons it didn't do too well on American television. But, it's on HBO.
Random detail aside, but it is LFN law. One of my favorite moments ever, Monty, was when I realized that one of the most annoying things about like League of Legends esports is there's this feigned civility that mean that everything bad in the world is just put up with. Where after Mark Merrill and Riot had fucked with Monty time after time after time, they fucked with his org, with his job casting, they fucked his reputation. Also, they said he's a liar a million times. Monty one time, just as part of a rant, goes like, listen, cocksucker, or something about, no, I don't think he was in cocksucker, I think he said motherfucker. I think he goes to motherfucker, talking about Mark Merrill. And someone I remember in the comments, like a mega upvoted comment, was like, that's just rude. Monty's not going to get anywhere saying things like that to people. And I'm just thinking, no, you can't say motherfucker one time. Jesus. America used to be made of sterner stuff. That's all I'm saying. It used to be made of sterner stuff.
Indeed.
All right, guys, we're going to finish our Sword and Sandals arc next week with Gladiator 1. Hooray! And Gladiator 2. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh god, it stinks. It stinks so
You know
much.
what? Here's the thing, you won't like it, Monty. Put it this way, I went into it with the best will in the world. I'm a massive Ridley Scott fan. Like I said before, I don't think I just like it as much as Richard, but it is just it's an empty
You even
movie.
look like Ridley Scott.
I do.
Young Ridley Scott.
I'm also from the same area if people don't know, but yeah, anyway. It's the problem it has, Monty, is essentially it's like a simulacrum of Gladiator. It's like it looks like it's right. Some of the dialogue seems like it's right, but it has no feeling to it at all. It's just an empty film, unfortunately. So you'll see. You'll just have to
Fabulous.
see.
So
it contrasts very poorly to Gladiator, put it that way.
We will spend our time on that next week before we announce our next arc. Actually, we've already talked about it like a million times. It's Robert Eggers, guys. Like you know that. We talked about this on the show previously. If you missed it. And you can also guess the movies because he only has 4 movies. So there are the 4 movies right there for you.
Nice.
So by the way, it does say something if you've only done 4 films and we're giving you an actual arc. We haven't even done a fucking arc for like Francis Ford Coppola or anything like so. But I agree, by the way. I actually do think that Robert Eggers is like the sleeper. Everyone already knows the ones from The Last Generation, Christopher Nolan, all them. Like he is like the director of this generation so far for me. He's a banger. Everything he does is just interesting. I'm just into it. I bought the ticket already, basically. You know.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. See you guys next week.